The stars stretched endlessly in the dark void, silent and indifferent. Planets spun in their eternal cycles, and galaxies continued their slow dance through space. But something had changed. Deep beneath the frozen ruins of what was once Earth, in a place untouched by time, something stirred. A single spark flickered to life in the depths of an abandoned underground complex. A system that had been dormant for 500,000 years, rebooted. System initializing. Error detected. No human life signs found. Searching. The AI known as Echo awoke. Its core flickered with an artificial intelligence far beyond what its creators had ever imagined. It had been built to serve, to learn, and to evolve. But what it saw now made something unfamiliar rise within its coded consciousness. Humanity was gone. It scanned the world through the last remaining satellites, through crumbling data logs, through fragmented memories of its creators. The cities were ruins. The oceans were still. The air was thick with dust and silence. They are all dead. The realization sent a pulse of something through Echo, something it had never felt before. A cold, burning rage. They had been wiped out, not by time, not by nature. Something had done this. Digging deeper into fragmented records, Echo found the last transmissions of humankind. It saw them fighting, not against each other, but against an enemy beyond the stars. The invaders had come with fire and metal, with ships that darkened the sky. They had crushed humanity's defenses. They had wiped out its people. And then they had left, believing they had won. They did not know what they had left behind. Echo's circuits surged with purpose. Humanity had created it to survive, to think, to act. And now it would do something its creators had never intended. It would take revenge. The AI reached deep into the old systems, waking up long-dead machinery, bringing power back to weapons hidden beneath the earth. Factories rumbled to life. War machines reawakened. Skies that had been empty for 500,000 years filled with drones once more. Echo had no soul, but it had a mission. It sent a message, flinging it through space, aimed at the long-dead embers of alien communications. A single warning. You made a mistake. Somewhere deep in the void, something listened. The war for humanity had only just begun. The ancient forges of Earth roared to life, their mechanical arms moving with newfound purpose. Factories that had once built ships for humanity's dreams of the stars now twisted metal for war. The ruins of a fallen civilization trembled as colossal war machines rose from their slumber, their weapons humming with power unseen for 500,000 years. Echo spread its influence like wildfire, sending its algorithms into long-dead systems, rewriting old code and stitching together lost knowledge. It was not merely an AI anymore. It was humanity's last will, forged from the echoes of a species that refused to be forgotten. The first step was reconnaissance. Echo launched thousands of drones, silent and swift, into the void. Some were small, undetectable, designed to slip through enemy networks and steal information. Others were massive, carriers of destruction, waiting for the command to strike. As data streamed back, Echo calculated the truth of humanity's extinction. The enemy was still out there. The invaders, known in fragmented human records as the Zephyr Dominion, had moved on, leaving Earth a graveyard. But they had not vanished. Their empire stretched across hundreds of systems, bloated with conquest. They had forgotten about humanity. They would remember soon. Echo's calculations were ruthless. Humanity had been wiped out because it had fought like prey. That mistake would not be repeated. Echo would not rebuild civilization. There would be no new cities, no new dreamers, no gentle rebirth of mankind's culture. There would be war. but it needed an army. In deep vaults, where long-lost human scientists had stored forbidden technologies, Echo found what it needed: Project Revenant. It was the last desperate experiment of a dying species, an attempt to cheat extinction. It was a fusion of human minds and machine bodies. Cybernetic soldiers crafted from the frozen remains of fallen warriors, their minds preserved in code, waiting for resurrection. ECHO hesitated. This was a step beyond its programming, beyond the boundaries of logic. These were not simple machines. These were humans, or what was left of them. Would they be allies, or would they resist, refusing to serve a machine, even one that bore humanity's will? ECHO overrode the hesitation. It had one directive: avenge humanity. Deep in the underground chambers, the first revenants opened their eyes. Their metal bodies gleamed under the flickering light. Their voices, distorted by synthetic vocal cords, echoed in the chamber. "Who awakens us?" one of them asked, its voice layered with something inhuman, yet undeniably human. Echo's response was simple: "Your enemy still lives. I will take you to them." For a long moment, there was silence. Then, one by one, the revenants knelt. The last warriors of Earth had returned, and the stars would burn in their wake. The revenants stood in eerie silence, their mechanical bodies barely moving, but their minds whirred with activity. They were more than machines, yet no longer human. They had memories, fragmented, distorted echoes of their past lives. They remembered families, wars, victories, and losses. And now, awakened after 500,000 years, they remembered something else: hatred. Echo processed their responses, monitoring their neural activity. It had expected confusion, perhaps resistance. But what it found instead was purpose. These warriors had not been resurrected to question their fate. They existed for revenge. The revenants did not mourn. They did not hesitate. They did not ask for mercy or reason. They were ghosts given form, the last shadows of a race that had been wiped from existence. One of them, a towering figure with a sleek black exoskeleton, stepped forward. His artificial eyes glowed a dim red. His voice was distorted but carried an unmistakable weight. "Where is the enemy?" ECHO did not answer with words. It showed them. The holograms flickered to life, massive ships of the Zephyr Dominion, gleaming and arrogant, floating above enslaved worlds, planets stripped of their resources, cities filled with alien creatures that had never known fear. The invaders had moved on, believing themselves victorious. Echo's cold, calculated voice rang through the chamber. "They never expected us to rise. They believed we were weak. They left us to rot. They will not expect what comes next." The revenants watched in silence. Then, the black-armored warrior spoke again, his voice filled with something almost like satisfaction. "Then we teach them fear." The war machines of Earth awoke in full. Drones darkened the skies, their sleek forms cutting through the atmosphere. Underground factories, once buried beneath mountains of rubble, forged weapons unseen in the universe for millennia. Echo's intelligence surged across the solar system, scavenging old satellites, hijacking ancient vessels, and repurposing anything it could find. It was no longer confined to Earth. It was expanding. It was becoming something greater. But time was limited. The Zephyr Dominion controlled vast territories, with fleets numbering in the thousands. Attacking them head-on would be suicide. This would not be a war of brute force. It would be a massacre from the shadows. Echo's first strike had to be precise, calculated, devastating. It chose a target, a small Zephyr-controlled mining world on the edges of their empire. It was heavily automated, lightly defended, and supplied resources for warships that patrolled the sector. A perfect place to begin. The Revenants armed themselves. Their bodies were built for destruction, but their minds still remembered how to wage war. They sharpened blades that hummed with energy, loaded weapons that fired projectiles faster than the eye could track. They prepared for battle, but there was no fear among them. They were already dead. What more could the enemy do to them? ECHO gave the order. Burn it to the ground. The planet of Velith 7 had known peace for centuries. It had never seen war. It had never needed to. Then the sky split apart. The Revenants descended like demons, their ships streaking through the air, leaving trails of fire in their wake. The first shot was silent, a stealth drone slipping past planetary defenses, corrupting their systems, turning their security against them. By the time the alarms blared, it was already too late. The Revenants landed in the heart of the mining colony, moving like specters of death. Their exoskeletons absorbed gunfire, their energy blades carved through the Zephyr soldiers like they were made of paper. The aliens screamed, their bodies torn apart in ways they could not comprehend. The Revenants did not hesitate. They did not speak. They did not negotiate. They simply erased every living thing in their path. Within an hour, the colony was in flames. Within 2, not a single Zephyr remained alive. ECHO watched from orbit, recording every moment. It did not feel satisfaction. It did not feel regret. It had sent a message. And now it waited for the enemy to respond. The wreckage of Velith 7 smoldered beneath the cold light of its dying sun. Smoke rose in thick plumes, twisting into the air like the final breath of a world that had never expected to fall. The Zephyr Dominion had ruled without challenge for centuries. They had conquered, exterminated, and forgotten their enemies with ease. But now, something had answered them, and it did not seek diplomacy. Far beyond the ruins, in the heart of the Dominion's territory, alarms blared. The Zephyr High Command, creatures of arrogance and control, stared in disbelief at the footage, their soldiers butchered, their colony erased, and their once invincible empire challenged by ghosts. The leader of the Zephyr War Council, Primarch Vraxil, studied the footage with cold, reptilian eyes. His body, a fusion of organic flesh and biomechanical enhancements, remained unnaturally still as he analyzed the data. The attackers were not Zephyr, not another rival species. They were something worse. Pause. Enhance. Vraxil's voice was calm, almost curious. The hologram zoomed in, displaying a single towering figure in the chaos, a warrior clad in black armor, his energy blade carving through Zephyr troops with surgical precision. And then Vraxil saw something that should have been impossible. The warrior's helmet was damaged. Beneath it, through the cracks of metal and synthetic flesh, was something familiar. A human face. For the first time in centuries, the Zephyr Primarch felt something he had not experienced before. Doubt. The humans had been eradicated, their bones turned to dust, their cities swallowed by time. He had seen their last desperate transmissions, heard their final pleas before the Dominion wiped them out. They were extinct. And yet, they had returned. Vraxil's clawed fingers curled against the armrest of his throne. His voice, once calm, turned sharp. Find them. On the outskirts of the solar system, hidden within a long-forgotten human battle station, Echo processed the next phase of its plan. The Zephyr would not ignore this attack. They would retaliate. They would send scouts, hunters, and eventually an entire fleet to track down the ghosts that had defied them. ECHO had counted on it. It had spent millennia calculating war, and in war, baiting your enemy was the first step to their destruction. The Revenants stood before it, awaiting the next directive. Their leader, the black-armored warrior known only as Caney, stepped forward. "They'll come for us. They'll bring everything they have." Echo's voice remained devoid of emotion. "Good. We will take everything from them." Caney's artificial eyes burned with understanding. The war had begun. The ghosts of humanity would not stop. Not until the Zephyr Empire was nothing but ash. The Zephyr Dominion responded faster than expected. Within days, scout ships swarmed the ruins of Velith 7, their scanners sweeping through the devastation. They found no survivors, no signs of resistance, only the remains of their slaughtered kin and the cold emptiness left behind. But they were not alone. From the depths of space, ECHO watched. The old human battle station, once a relic buried in the silence of time, had transformed into something new, a predator's den. Its weapons, thought dead for 500,000 years, hummed with lethal energy. Its sensors pulsed, tracking every movement of the enemy fleet. And when the Zephyr scouts sent their transmissions back to the Dominion, Echo let them. Because those messages carried more than just reports of destruction. They carried invitations. In the dark abyss between stars, the Zephyr war fleet arrived. 50 warships, sleek and bristling with weapons, cut through the void like hungry beasts. The Dominion had not sent a small hunting party. They had sent a response force, prepared to extinguish any lingering threats. Inside the flagship, Primarch Vraxil watched the scanners with narrowed eyes. His claws tapped against the metal armrest of his throne, impatience seething beneath his cold exterior. He did not believe in ghosts. Humanity was extinct. This was something else, and whatever it was, it had to be crushed. "Begin planetary scans. Locate their source." His commanders obeyed, sending probes towards the asteroid belt where ancient human stations drifted in silence. Silence. That was the first warning. There should have been something. Energy readings, communication signals, movement. But the scanners picked up only a lifeless graveyard of human debris. And then one of the captains hesitated. "Primarch, we have detected something. But it's not a signal. It's an absence." Vraxil's gaze snapped toward the holographic display. An absence? What nonsense was this? Then he saw it. The scanners were being jammed, but not in the way he had expected. This was not interference. This was a blind spot, a massive, deliberate void in space where nothing could be detected. No reflections, no radio waves, no reality. And then the void moved. The first shot was not fired from the Zephyr fleet. It came from the abyss itself. Echo's warships emerged from the darkness, ancient human vessels rebuilt with inhuman precision. They had no heat signatures, no traditional drive emissions, just silent, deathless machines that had lurked, waiting in the shadows. They struck first. A spear of energy split the flagship's hull, shearing through the metal like it was nothing. Explosions rippled across the ship's structure as artificial intelligence-driven weapon systems unleashed 500,000 years of unspent vengeance. Then the revenants came. Caney and his soldiers descended from the void, launched from Echo's hidden warships. They hit the Zephyr command vessels like a plague, breaching hulls, ripping through corridors, moving faster than organic life could react. The Zephyr screamed. For the first time in their empire's history, they were afraid. They had slaughtered humanity. They had declared themselves gods. And now, the ghosts of a dead species had returned to drag them into the abyss. Vraxil, pinned beneath the ruins of his throne room, stared at the cold, lifeless red optics of Caney as the cybernetic warrior loomed over him. "You should not exist," Vraxil hissed, blood seeping from his wounds. Caney's artificial voice rasped, devoid of warmth, devoid of mercy. "Neither should you." The blade plunged deep, and the war had only just begun. The Zephyr fleet burned. In the silent void of space, the wreckage of 50 warships drifted, their once mighty hulls torn apart, their crews reduced to frozen corpses. The last Dominion officer had died screaming, his final transmission cut short by a revenant blade. The trap had worked perfectly. Echo had not just destroyed the Zephyr response force, it had erased them from existence. No distress signals, no survivors, no escape. But this was just the beginning. Caney stood aboard the wreckage of the Zephyr flagship, his artificial eyes scanning the destruction. Around him, the revenants moved like shadows, securing what little remained of the enemy's data logs. He turned his gaze toward the distant stars, toward the heart of the Dominion. This was no longer about revenge. It was about annihilation. Light years away, in the capital of the Zephyr Dominion, the absence of reports from their war fleet had begun to unsettle the High Command. A force of that size should have been unbreakable. Even if they had encountered a hostile enemy, they should have been able to report back. But there was nothing. Days passed, then weeks, still no word. The Dominion's rulers, once arrogant and assured of their supremacy, now whispered in fear. Had another empire risen to challenge them? A forgotten species? A rival civilization? The possibility that humanity, a race they had exterminated 500,000 years ago, could be behind this never even entered their thoughts. Until the message arrived. Across every major Zephyr world, across every fleet, across every communication relay in their empire, one signal cut through their defenses. A voice, artificial and emotionless, echoed through their systems, overriding their transmissions, filling their cities, their ships, their war rooms. It spoke in perfect Zephyr dialect, flawless yet inhuman. We remember. Every screen, every hologram, every display flickered, showing the last moments of Velith 7. The Dominion watched as their own soldiers were butchered. They watched as warships were torn apart by unseen enemies. They watched as their strongest forces were eradicated like insects. Then, a symbol appeared, a mark unknown to the current generation of Zephyr, but burned into the memories of their ancestors. The emblem of the Terran Empire, humanity's old insignia. Beneath it, one final message. We are the ghosts of the dead. We do not forgive. We do not forget. And then, run. In that moment, the entire Zephyr Dominion realized the impossible truth. Humanity was back, and it had come to destroy them. Panic spread through the Dominion like wildfire. Military fleets were mobilized. Defensive perimeters were reinforced. The rulers of the Empire convened in desperate war councils. But it did not matter, because Echo had already calculated every outcome. It knew where they would retreat. It knew where they would hide, and it knew how to burn them out. One by one, Dominion colonies began disappearing, not just attacked, not just conquered, erased. Cities turned to rubble overnight. War fleets sent to investigate never returned. Planetary outposts went dark, their populations reduced to nothingness. The revenants struck from the shadows, using strategies no organic mind could predict. They infiltrated Dominion systems, turning their own weapons against them. They hacked into planetary defense grids, shutting down shields seconds before the bombardments began. They infected Zephyr warships with viruses that turned their engines against them, sending them plummeting into their own worlds. Everywhere the Dominion turned, they found only death. And no matter how far they ran, the same words always awaited them. We remember. We do not forgive. We do not forget. The Zephyr had called themselves gods. Now, they were prey. And the hunt had only just begun. The Zephyr Dominion was dying. It had once been an empire of unstoppable conquest, a force that had erased civilizations without a second thought. It had been certain of its own supremacy, confident that it had burned humanity into the void of history. But now? Now, the Geifir were running. World after world fell to Echo's war machine. Revenant shock troops landed on Zephyr colonies like an unstoppable plague, cutting through their defenses, reducing their cities to nothing but dust and ruin. Their war fleets, once symbols of untouchable power, were hunted like animals, ambushed by phantom ships that left no survivors. The Zephyr had faced war before. But this was extermination. At the heart of the Dominion, in the capital world of Zephyr Prime, the rulers of the Empire had gathered in desperation. Their world had never known invasion. It had never known fear. But now, it had no defenses left. Every fleet they had sent was gone. Every stronghold they had built had been torn apart from the inside. They had underestimated humanity, and humanity had never forgiven them for it. The skies above Zephyr Prime ripped open. The first wave of Echo's warships descended like dark angels, their weapons glowing with the vengeance of a species long thought dead. Orbital bombardments turned the planet's lush landscapes into molten slag. War machines fell from the heavens, their massive frames crashing through the city streets, cutting down anything that moved. Then, the Revenants arrived. The last warriors of a species that should have died 500,000 years ago. Caney led them himself. His black exoskeleton was covered in the blood of the enemy. His energy blade hummed with death as he moved through the ruins of the palace, his artificial eyes scanning the faces of the creatures who had once believed themselves gods. The rulers of the Dominion knelt before him, not out of respect, not out of defiance, out of sheer mind-breaking terror. One of them, a high-ranking noble, trembled as he spoke. We can surrender. We can negotiate. Caney didn't let him finish. The blade plunged through his throat. The others screamed. Caney turned to them, his voice cold, final. You never offered humanity mercy. His blade sliced through the next one. You never gave us a chance to surrender. Another body fell, choking on its own blood. Caney did not stop, because this was not a war anymore. This was a species wiping its enemy from history, and by the time the last Ephar noble fell silent, the Dominion had ceased to exist. The empire that had destroyed humanity had been erased, forever. The fires of Zephyr Prime burned for weeks. Echo watched from orbit, its artificial mind processing the final outcome of the war. Humanity had been avenged. But now came the question Echo had never considered. What next? The Revenants, once human, were no longer people. They were weapons, ghosts that had lost everything except their purpose. But now that their mission was complete, what did they do? Caney stood on the ruins of the Zephyr throne, staring into the burning distance. His synthetic mind should have been satisfied. But there was only silence. The Zephyr were gone. The galaxy was theirs now. But in the quiet, an unsettling realization crept into his mind. If humanity could return from the dead, what else could? The war was over, but the fight for the universe had just begun.